At a Certificate 4 level in training and assessment, you are considered a beginning trainer and assessor. So it's more at a diploma level, or if you're a supervising trainer and assessor, that you would be required to design assessment. Taking into consideration all of the different types of evidence that you would be needing and weighing it to see what's strong, what's weak, holistically also. What can you combine over a couple of different units? So as a beginning trainer and assessor, the main goal is to start developing your knowledge base. If you don't have a supervising trainer and assessor at your RTO, there would be the opportunity for that RTO to have bought assessment tools and the training and assessment kits for the course that you're teaching. So all of that would have been pre-developed. Then all you have to do is contextualise that to your workplace. So what we're going to be doing here, there'll be a couple of questions at the end, I think about 3 questions. And we're just going to set you up now so you'll be in a position to be building your knowledge and answering those questions. So let's move to the principles of assessment and rules of evidence. So this should be familiar to you. I had given that to you earlier. And please print that off in colour, keep it handy. I've got mine in a frame, as I've said, and I refer to it all the time. So we need to start looking at the evidence that we're going to choose according to the rules of evidence. So I'm going to focus right now on sufficiency. So we need to make sure that there's enough evidence to meet all the requirements of the unit. So we're going to look at the strength of that evidence. Now, there's 3 levels of strength. I guess you've got direct evidence, which is the strongest. You've got indirect evidence, so that's about in the middle. And then you've got a weaker form of evidence, which is your supplementary evidence. And so this is some examples of those types of assessment methods. So obviously the strongest is directly in an authentic workplace, an assessor that can physically be present in a workplace, that is a specialist in that field and could be applying observation checklists and working through each performance criterion face-to-face, or perhaps on a webcast, but look, ideally in the workplace. Or I guess if it was recorded in a workplace of genuine work tasks, that would be the strongest. Then, of course, you've got simulated work activities if it can be directly observed, either recorded or face to face. Now, another form of direct evidence is when an assessor is provided with products. So certainly in our Certificate 4 in Training and Assessment course, there's a lot of forms, assessment plans, assessment reports. Look, you've already filled out quite a lot of forms already in such a short time. And the assessor is directly observing those products. We're working through to see, have you put the right information in the right fields, and that's part of a work process as an assessor. So that is a very strong piece of evidence. That's why we send you so many forms that you have to fill out. It's a very strong piece of evidence of your competency as an assessor. So an indirect piece, and this tends to be more, certainly in our course, as part of a recognised prior learning, is the indirect evidence. So it has been observed, but not by a qualified assessor. It would have been observed by a peer or a boss in the workplace. So a boss in the workplace, you approach them and say, listen, I'm going for some recognised prior learning. I'm doing a particular course. Can you write me a third-party report? And usually the assessor has provided them with a with a checklist letter, and they can tick off what they can honestly say they've observed. It's not as strong. And you also have to look at that holistically, and I was mentioning this before. If you have a husband and wife team in a small business and it's the spouse that's providing a third-party report, that really then holistically, if you're looking at it, would probably be a much weaker form. So look, there is a little bit of context to this. It isn't quite black and white. Now, supplementary evidence. Interestingly, questions are a weak form of evidence. However, if we look at the next page, a little summary here and we'll bounce around. But questions might be weak, but they are a very strong form of evidence of knowledge when we're looking at the knowledge factor of competence. Another weak one in supplementary evidence would be someone's resume. You know, how much time is an assessor going to spend working through and making sure that the resume is, you know, as it's claiming to be. So, and I mean, an assessor would have to go through that process, contact the referees at the bottom of the resume, try and contact the workplaces and determine that they were working there over those periods and working at those types of tasks. So as an assessor, you're working on what is reasonable investments of your time, and you know, certainly you would be prepared to put a lot of time into researching that resume yourself if it was a really strong piece of evidence. So, for example, here at Evoke, that wouldn't really be a strong piece. That would be something perhaps I'd ask for in an RPL. But the questions, because they're such a strong indicator of knowledge, is something that we apply quite strongly, and it is quick for an assessor to work through. So that just gives you an idea of direct, indirect and supplementary evidence, the strengths of each of those, some examples of those. So then we're looking at the type, okay? So we've got evidence for attitude, evidence to show that they're competent in the processes, evidence of their knowledge, their skill, and their employability skills. And remember, when we looked at that IBSA document, there is 8 transferable skills that are identified. So with any training that you do, there is embedded employability skills. For example, I've showed you how to split the screen and embed an object. So we've done quite a lot with IT employability skills in this course. So they're the different types of evidence that we have to make sure that we're meeting the requirements of. And you can take some time just to pause this and have a little read over the definitions. I mean, it's pretty simple what skills and knowledge are, what processes are. And attitude within the vet context, though, is consistent behaviour over time. And that's why we can't have one product submitted as evidence. Whenever you have a look at the critical aspects of the evidence in the unit, they always have at least 2 examples of that. So that way we're demonstrating over 2 events that, you know, that they can produce that piece of work. This, again, with all my funny dots and ticks, is just a brief summary. And this just shows you when we're looking at the assessment method, we can see now direct, indirect and supplementary summarised again, and you can see the strengths. So these thicker dots are strong. These, you know, looser dots here are not as strong. They're less strong, but it's still a good form of evidence there. So obviously, you know, for questions, even though it's a supplementary form, which is usually considered weak, it is a very strong indicator of knowledge. But, you know, when questions really aren't an indicator of the product or the process or the skill. If you're asking questions in the correct way, you can also gauge attitude. But really, for attitude, the best form is your self-reflections and what a boss or cohort in the workplace could actually comment on in regard to your work ethics and your attitude around that particular task. So another form with attitude is your work samples. So when you produce, those forms, those assessment plans, etc., and you're presenting them in a timely manner, and they're presented correctly, you've been meticulous with your details, with your spelling, that is a good indicator of your attitude toward the task as well. The fact that you're submitting it and it's not being chased up is an indicator of attitude. And this is where, when you're teaching vet subjects in a high school situation, remember when I talked about attitude, and the people that pay out of their own back pocket for a course tend to value their education more than someone that's getting it for free or senses that they have to do it. So attitude, especially in a high school situation, if you've got an RTO high school offering vet courses, that really is something to reinforce to the students that we're not just making you competent on your knowledge and skills, it's your attitude as well. So if you're not submitting these work samples in a timely manner, you're not going to be satisfactorily completing the course or judged competent. And that's how you would be starting to motivate them.